Hey everybody, John here, Old Hickory Forge. Welcome back. So, I've received a custom commission for a Damascus bushcraft knife. So I figured I'd walk you through the process of making the Damascus by hand all the way throughout making the knife. So I'm going to do a series of videos on it. There might be two videos, one on creating the steel and one on making the knife out of it. Now, I've heard some people go as far as to say that you can't make Damascus by hand, you have to have a power hammer or a press. Well, that's just straight up not true. Here's a 36 layer ladder pattern. Here's an 80 layer twist pattern. These were all done by hand, so it definitely is possible. That if you have a solid grasp of forge welding, it's really not that difficult. It's just pretty time consuming. So what we got here to start, we got 12 layers of some 1080 and some 15 and 20 high carbon steels. First thing we got to do is grind off all this mill scale, the crap that's on the steel when it comes out of the rolling mill, because that can interfere with your forge weld. So we'll grind it all clean, we'll tack it together, weld on this little 3/4 inch peg, and we'll get started. The reason I don't like welding a handle onto my billets is because I find they break off pretty easily, but if you have a little peg that fits your tongs perfectly, it's easier to manipulate your billet around. Also, caveat, anytime anyone mentions Damascus on like blacksmithing or bladesmithing for beginners or any of the Facebook groups, there's always one or two guys, and this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, but they always freak out over somebody using the term Damascus. They're like, oh, that's just pattern welded steel. Real Damascus was made in the Middle East 1,000 years ago, and nobody's known how to do it for 100 years, and you're a poser. If you're going to come at me with that nonsense, take it somewhere else. I will block you so quick you won't even know what happened. Anyway, let's make some Damascus. So, first thing you're going to do is just heat your billet up to about red or so. You don't want to go too hot. And just give it a good generous coating of flux on all the exposed seams on both ends as well as the sides. Keep all the air out of there so you can get a good forge weld. Well, here we go. Just gentle blows up and down the whole length of the billet, brush it, flux it back in the fire. Alright, second weld, here we go, a little harder this time. So here's what we got. After about 3 welding heats, you can see the seams are starting to blend in. It's behaving as one piece of steel now. So all I got to do now is just draw this thing out until I get enough length to cut it and restack it. I'm going to cut into 3 pieces and restack and weld all that together because I'm going for 36 layers. Don't worry about your end looking screwed up like that. You're going to end up cutting that off anyway. But there you go. The welds took, so let's draw this thing out. I'll spare you the pain of actually sitting here watching me draw it out. Alright, so here's what we got. We got what's looking to be a really good looking bar of Damascus. All the welds took beautifully. Be sure to keep it at a welding heat when you're drawing out to keep the stress off of your welds. But you see I've got it marked off 1/4 inch from each end. The seams on the ends never really weld properly, so you're going to lose those every time you cut and fold, so just plan to mark them off. But we're going to cut this in 3 equal sections, grind it clean, tack it back together, forge weld it back together, and get back to drawing this baby out. As you can see, after grinding the faces of steel clean to get a good forge weld, we can see no inclusions or anything like that, so we got good solid steel. Ends are looking good as well. So we'll fire up the welder, tack all these back together, weld our handle back on, and we'll forge weld all this back together, and we'll keep going. Alright, here we go, first weld. That felt really good. With practice, you'll learn to kind of feel when the metal tacks together. So, here's after the first few welding cycles. You can see the seams are starting to disappear. Welds are good and solid. So, all that's got to happen now, we'll draw this thing to about half of its finished length and thickness, and then we'll go ahead and cut the grooves into it to make the ladder pattern. I'll explain more about that as we're doing it. And then draw it out to its finished length and thickness to get the size stock we need for the knife we want to make, and we'll be good to go. So, I've got the billet drawn out to about half of its finished length and thickness. I'm going for a billet that's about 9.5 inches by about 1/4 inch thick, so I'm about halfway there. But now what we got to do is cut the grooves in it to make the ladder pattern. What cutting the grooves does is when you cut the grooves in and forge it flat, it brings the different layers to the surface, and that's what creates the ladder pattern we're looking for. So whenever you're trying to make ladder Damascus, You either need to forge in the grooves and then grind your billet flat, or you need to grind in the grooves and then forge your billet flat. Like, I've seen some people just try to forge in grooves on the edge of their anvil and then flatten it out, and they wonder why they didn't get a pattern. So, bringing different layers of the surface is what you're trying to do. Also, a quick point, you want to make sure that your marks, or your grooves you cut, are kind of staggered on each side. You don't want them to really line up with each other. Otherwise, you'll just have the same pattern on both sides, and it's just not quite as interesting. You can do that if you want to, but I prefer it to have a little more character. So let's get these grooves cut in. So all that's left now is to forge the billet flat, bring it out to its final dimensions. I like to do this at a welding heat. You probably don't have to at this point, but it certainly doesn't hurt anything. So here's what we got out of the forge, 36 layers ladder pattern. Let's grind this baby clean and etch it. And into the acid she goes. We'll give that about 5 minutes and then we'll check out this pattern. So here we go. Yeah, for about 10 minutes in the etch and then neutralizing the acid. The pattern's kind of milky right now because this is only at 80 grit. When it's actually sanded all the way up the grits and polished, it'll look a lot nicer, as well as when this is made into a knife and it's actually hardened, the acid will react with it a little bit differently and bring out the darker and lighter steels a little bit better. But that's the gist of it. You see those grooves we cut that brought all the different layers to the surface. Kind of looks like a ladder. That's why it's called ladder Damascus. But anyway, I just wanted to show you that, like I said, if you have a solid grasp of forge welding, making Damascus can very well be done by hand. I've been told quite a few times by quite a few people that you have to have a power hammer or a press, and well, you know, that's just plain old not true. Just kind of time consuming, but there you go. So yeah, 36 layer ladder Damascus, all done by hand. Like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Lots more cool stuff coming. Next video is going to be making a knife out of this bad boy.